Okay, so there is a question from Canada which says, what is the punishment for a father who never provided for his 3 daughters, walked out after 16 years, demanded a divorce and withdrew his parental rights for his daughters? Okay, brothers and sisters, sometimes things don't work out between people, right? Between a husband and wife. Sometimes things don't work out. And the Shari', the legislator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has legislated for us, the concept of divorce, right? And there is divorce from the side of the man, and there is khul', which is also a type of divorce, although there's no accurate translation, I think, in English, but it's a type of divorce. It's a type of asking for divorce from the side of woman, right? So these things happen. Sometimes one of the 2 parties is doing some dhulm, oppression. Other times, both of the 2 parties are doing oppression. And sometimes there are just 2 good people that, they're like jigsaw pieces. They just don't get along, right? They don't get along. They're not compatible. And for whatever reason, they've come to the conclusion that divorce is the best thing for them, right? And sometimes this happens. Even though, at this juncture, I like to point out that a lot of people, they have this rosy-dozy, romantic idea of marriage, which is sometimes not achievable, and I would argue that in many, many cases is not always achievable. This kind of fantasy, dreamland type marriage, right? No, marriage, it's obviously give and take from both sides. We have rights over each other. Also, when it comes to marriage, sometimes marriage is not based on love, right? For example, a man came to Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and basically he said that, look, my wife hates me. She hates me. So Umar radiallahu anhu summoned his wife, this man's wife, and said, he asked her, why did you tell him that you hate him? So she said that, look, I tried to avoid answering the question, and then eventually he asked me by Allah, unshiduki billah, right? I'm asking you by Allah. So he's mentioning Allah's name, and obviously the Sahaba, they understood the importance of mentioning Allah's name, right? They took it seriously, not like the way we just, randomly say things. No, mention Allah's name. No, they took Allah's name seriously. So this woman, she says that he asked me by Allah's name, do you love me? And when he did that, I had no choice but to tell him I don't love him, right? I think one of the narrations states that she said she hates him, actually. Or she dislikes him. Now, Umar ibn al-Khattab, look what he replied. And this is really important. If you want your marriage to work, especially if you have children, then you need to understand this concept, right? He says, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu says, that she should have not told him that, even if he mentioned Allah's name. And what he's indicating here is that she was allowed to lie even by mentioning Allah's name, right? Why? Because lying is allowed in certain circumstances. One of those circumstances is to your spouse when you are trying to, you don't want to make them feel bad. So as an example, your wife spends or your husband spends hours cooking for you or doing something for you. And then they ask you, okay, how did you like this biryani that I cooked for you, right? It is permissible in this case, rather maybe some scholars even say it's recommended to lie. Like, this biryani could be the most terrible biryani you've ever eaten, right? It might be disgusting. But in this case, it's allowed to lie that, oh, wallah, it's such a beautiful, it's delicious biryani. I have not tasted anything like it, right? So why? Because this increases, so this person, it doesn't hurt their feelings and so on and so forth, right? And obviously you have to live with them as well. So you see the hikmah of Islam. So these are one of the situations where the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam allowed Muslims to lie, even though lying is a major sin. And just as a side point, another example of when it's allowed to lie is when you're bringing two Muslims that are fighting together. So they might hate each other's guts. So you go to one person and you say, hey, you know, the other guy, he really likes you, and you know, he's upset with you, but he really likes you, blah, blah, blah. And then you go to the other guy, you say the same thing. Oh, you know that first guy, he really likes you, and blah, blah, blah. Then slowly, Allah brings their hearts together, right? This is not the same as taqiyya. I see a comment there saying taqiyya, right? This is not taqiyya at all. Taqiyya is haram, right? But this, taqiyya means, this is what some people do, and some sects, they do, and it means to hide what your religion is, right? Without any kind of need. You're not being forced or anything like that, or, you know, guns not being pointed to you. No, this is not taqiyya. This is clear-cut lying, right? But it is permissible lying, because you are bringing two people together, and like when it comes to your spouse, you're allowed to lie in order to, so that, you know, you bring the hearts together, or you avoid them getting really upset. They've spent hours cooking you your favorite food, and then you go away and you know, you know, if you say the truth, then it won't be good for them. So in this case, it's permissible to lie, right? So Umar ibn al-Khattab, in this story that I mentioned, he's telling this lady that she should have lied in this case, right? He's indicating that she should have lied. When the husband has asked her, do you love me, right? Or do you hate me, right? She should have lied, even though she didn't love him and she really strongly disliked him. She shouldn't have told him that. And then Umar ibn al-Khattab mentions a very powerful principle. And I really wish that brothers and sisters, especially in our times, I deal with so many cases of divorce, and unfortunately there's similar issues, right? People are living in la la land, and they're not prepared for the real world, right? They're not prepared for the real world. They're living in Hollywood and Bollywood and Lollywood and whatever else, right? And they're not prepared for the real world, right? So they think that marriage is a bed of roses. It's all about, you know, romance and stuff. Umar ibn al-Khattab, he replies, he says, not every marriage is based on love. Not every marriage is based on love. When I first studied this narration, I was quite taken aback. Like, how can a marriage not be based on love? But this shows the hikmah of Islam. After dealing with so many divorce cases, I realized that, subhanallah, many people, right, they get to a certain age, they think that love is romance, and that's not the case, right? Love is not the same as romance. Of course, this doesn't mean you don't have romance, but the point here is that if you base your marriage on that, then it's likely to fall apart at some point. So a marriage is a contract, it's an agreement, it's something that you live with ma'ruf with one another, with kindness and goodness with one another. And so this is really important. Now, the second part of this question, right, where are we? Okay, so the second part of this question says, so the sister is asking that this man, he walked out after 16 years, demanded a divorce, and withdrew his parental rights for his daughters. So look, even if in a situation that, look, you try to bring the husband and wife together, etc., etc., in a situation where this is not practical, then it is permissible to go for divorce, right? It's permissible to go for divorce. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, this does not mean that a divorce has to be based on hatred or anything like that. No. One can divorce on good terms. Also, my brothers and sisters, another important point is, just because you divorce, and this is specifically to brothers, just because you divorce your wife, it does not mean that your children, your daughters, your sons don't have rights over you. Rather, they still have rights over you. You are still their father, right? And there are so many examples, or so many huquq rather, there's so many examples of rights that still have to be given even after the divorce. So for example, if there's a child, it is upon the father to provide for that child, right? It is fard, it's an obligation, he's sinning if he does not provide for that child, even if that child is living with his mother or her mother, right? So it is obligatory to provide for that child. So I say to this father who's done this, to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your wife has a right over you. Your children have rights over you. It is obligatory upon the husband to provide for his wife, for his children, and that includes, for example, in the West, by the way, this notion that the wife has to support the husband financially, in Islam, this is not true at all. In Islam, even if the wife is a millionaire and she owns 60 houses, right? And brothers often don't like me saying this, but this is Islam. Even if the wife is a millionaire and she owns 60 houses, it is still obligatory upon the husband to provide financial support for her. And that means he needs to provide a house for her. He needs to provide food, drink, medication, clothes of her level, right? Based on her level and his level. And on top of that, not only that, by the way, obviously she has the right to help out as well. There's nothing wrong with helping out. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that if she refuses to help out, she says, no, I don't want to help out, right? I don't want to go to work, then it is obligatory upon the husband to provide this financial support. Now this is the right, these are some of the rights that Islam gives to the wives, right? To women folk. And many people from the West, they claim that Islam is backward and it doesn't give women rights. SubhanAllah, what about this right? One of the most fundamental rights is the right to a house, the right to food, drink, accommodation, medication, and all of this stuff, right? In Islam, according to the stronger view among the ulama, all of these things are obligatory upon the husband if the wife refuses to pay for these things, okay? So, and it's her right, and the husband cannot say anything. It's her right. So I advise this brother to fear Allah. Now bear in mind, there's a guy in the comments, he's misrepresenting what I said, Robert. I did not say that lying is permissible. I said lying is permissible for certain reasons. Lying is a major sin, my brother. Right? Lying is a major sin in Islam. Right? So you should not represent what I'm saying in the comments. If you want to be truthful, then quote what I said properly and then you can discuss it, Robert. Right? But don't misquote what I'm saying because that's not academically honest. Right? I did not say that lying itself is permissible. I made it very clear that lying is a major sin in Islam. However, there are exceptions to that rule. Right? In certain cases, it is permissible to lie. For example, Robert, let me ask you this question. If a person has gone out of their way to cook you food, your wife has gone out of her way to cook you some food, and then she asks you, hey, I spent all this time cooking you food, right? Are you telling me that if the husband says that the food is really delicious, even though he doesn't like the food, are you telling me this is a sin? Are you telling me it's wrong to do that, Robert? I'm waiting for your answer, Robert. Right? So I'm calling you out now so you can answer that question. Secondly, another example of when lying is permissible is, imagine someone comes to you and says, do you know where so-and-so is? And he's got a gun in his hand. Right? He wants to kill that so-and-so. And you know that person, where that person is. And you don't have the ability to stop that person from killing that guy. But that guy is in your house and you know where that person is. And this guy with the gun comes to you and he says, hey, do you know where so-and-so is? Right? Are you going to tell the truth in such a situation? Yeah, I know where he is. Come kill him. Are you crazy? Of course, there are situations where it's permissible to lie. And among them is some of the situations that we have. These are just some examples. Of course, as a general rule, I made it very clear, Robert. As a general rule, it is not permissible to lie. It is haram to lie. It is impermissible. It is unlawful. And it is sinful. All right? So please, Robert, don't misquote me in the comments. That is a very shameful thing to do. In fact, ironically, it is a lie to quote me saying that I allowed lying. Right? Ironically. So I ask you to retract that statement and at least be honest. You may disagree with me with our religion of Islam. That's fine. I don't have an issue with that. We can discuss whether Islam is the truth or not. We can discuss all of these things. That's fine. I'm happy to do that. But don't misquote me. Don't be academically dishonest. That you're only embarrassing yourself. Okay?